View from the Gutters, episode 76. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Hellboy, Seed of Destruction, and Wake the Devil. And, to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 106.33. What episode is this?
76.
Episode 76. I'm Ed Richard.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
I'm Brant Gillahan Eddy.
And I'm Kate Reynolds.
No Joe Preddy this week. He has moved on to a better place.
He's visiting his family.
He's in Seattle.
Yeah.
That's better.
Well, he loves his family. So.
That's nice. Yeah.
So,
He's actually maybe working on a secret episode.
Oh, really?
Right now. He did call me about some audio gear.
Ooh, secret episodes.
And some recording stuff. So I was like, what are you doing up there, buddy? What secret episodes are you recording? So that's cool.
Yeah.
But this week, we are talking about Hellboy. Trades 1 and 2.
Seed of Destruction and Wake the Devil.
And I did have a question because in the second book, there's an asterisk that references another Hellboy story because they printed the comics in a different issue, in a different order than they printed the trades, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, Wake the Devil is actually a mini-series that was printed after the comics that were released in Volume 3.
Right.
And I think they released it as Volume 2 because it follows directly from Seed of Destruction in terms of, like, what events are happening.
The number I was looking at was actually that Seeds of Destruction was 1 through 4, and then Wake the Devil shows up as number 7 through 11.
Okay.
In the original run numbering.
Ah.
And there were a bunch of one-issues stories in between.
And those got collected in later trades, right?
Yeah. But that's the whole problem with the trades. This is one of a handful of problems I have with Hellboy, which is not saying much, is that the trades collect the stories out of order, they're published out of order, and there's not a strong sense in any of the trades about what exactly the timing is. At least that doesn't happen for a while. And so when you read like the first, I think 6 or 7 volumes of Hellboy trades, it's very confusing until you realize, oh, these are happening non-linearly.
Right.
And that is never, I haven't read as much of the newer stuff, but I've gotten the impression that they're stronger in noting the year that things are happening in a way that they don't think they were initially.
Yeah, the B.P.R.D. stuff is, I think, kind of the first time that they started doing that, because they would do B.P.R.D. and then they would do B.P.R.D. like 1949, 1946, and they would put the year on a lot of stuff. And then when they would do the Abe Sapien and Lobster Johnson miniseries, those always had the dates in them because they were like retro stories. They were like at least the Lobster Johnson ones are pre-B.P.R.D. stories.
Right.
So those have numbering for a reason. And I think the Abe Sapien ones do too, or at least they say when they occur.
Yeah.
Because Abe Sapien has an ongoing now, as far as I know. I think
He
issue
did for a little
14
while.
is
I don't
coming
know
out
if
soon.
I don't follow Hellboy closely. So.
Yeah. But that is a major problem with that. It's kind of like, it's hard because it's not quite the same as when pulp stories used to be published like out of order because that was the order that the author wrote them in, but not necessarily the order that the characters experienced those stories in. But this is even weirder because it's like that, and then when they collect it, they change the order again.
Well, and it jumps so significantly because Seed and Wake are basically, well, at the time of publication, they were supposed to be now, right? I always got that impression that they were relatively modern.
Right.
Yes.
And then a lot of those
less.
stories happen in the 40s, 50s era. And so it's like, whoa.
Well, it's set in the 90s because, like, he's been a paranormal investigator or I guess it could be set in the 2000s because he's been a paranormal investigator for 40 years.
Right.
I think at
In
one
the
point he
first
says
one.
52 years he's been doing this. In Wake the Devil. I think at one point he says, like, I've been doing this for 52 years.
Well, in the first one, in Seed of Destruction, that's the first one, right?
Yeah, Seed of Destruction is the first.
He says 40 years, which leads me to believe that, like, a lot of time passes between these two volumes.
Maybe.
Well, they say that, what's-her-face, the girl...
Liz,
that she quits at the end of Seed of Destruction, and she's coming back in Wake the Devil.
But she's also
and she
quit.
says she's been gone for 8 months.
She's also quit 13 times, though.
That's true.
So, like, these could be different times. And also, the story in which Hellboy shoots the witch in the eye is collected in a different trade.
Baba Yaga.
Yeah. So there's, like, all this time that may have passed.
I feel like it was intentional at first, right? It gives him a lot of different... I mean, the same thing like you're talking about, like in Pulp, right?
Right.
Like, you tell your Conan stories out of order, and you leave enough weird hooks so that you can be like, and then this thing happened, or actually, what you really don't know was that. I think it's pretty savvy, which, I mean, Mignola had already been working in the industry for quite some time, so he probably had a decent sense that would serve him well in the future to kind of...
Well, it's something I wish...
Play fast and loose with that stuff.
I wish it's something I wish superhero comics would do more. Because nowadays they tend to be, like, locked into this linear format that, like, when the next Batman issue comes out, I know that it happens after the one I read before, where books like Legends of the Dark Knight were more like this, where they would play around with, like, oh, I'm not exactly sure when this is happening in Batman's history. But,
Right.
Oh,
Does
well,
it really matter?
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, it's about telling a good story about Hellboy. The problem with this series, as opposed to that, though, is sometimes the timing does matter in the series, I think.
Right.
It's like, sometimes it's helpful to know what order things are happening in.
I also think that you have this natural issue where the more... So the other... Because he does this visually as well as chronologically. There are characters in the background, like in Seeds of Destruction, it's... I think the guy's a name, and I can't remember off the top of my head. It's like the Flame of Liberty or whatever the guy is.
Oh, yeah, Torch of Liberty.
Torch of Liberty. You know... He's in the background, he's mentioned, but like he's obviously not really explored as a character. But that gives him somebody to like totally, like, you know, Lobster Johnson was kind of that way too.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like, I think it was very clear that Mignola was kind of just seeding lots of things, whether just because he thought it was fun or cool, because of course, if you ever listen to interviews with him, there seems to be a lot of the series was just kind of like, I thought it was a good idea. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, like as the universe is naturally expanded and the more stories you get, you're kind of like, well... For this to make sense, I kind of need it to be laid out.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm sure there's fan chronologies online of just like, this is the order in which these books happen.
Conan was very much the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
There were a bunch of stories that happened. Sometimes he would give an like, this is how old he is now. And just based on like maps and stuff, people were kind of able to track out, like, this is roughly the progression of his life. These are how all these events fit together. But that was backfilled in much later. Yeah. And so I think on a certain level, it's okay for there to just be events where it's like, here's this time that Hellboy fought a monster. When did it happen? It doesn't really matter. We'll figure it out later.
Well, let's be honest. For any of that stuff, at the end of the day, is this not the single most successful creator-owned property? It may not have sold as many issues as others. Like I'm thinking of like Robert Kirkman's Invincible,
Dead.
But Invincible doesn't have 2 movies that are like relatively well known and made money. Like,
and we're super awesome.
I can't think of another independent owned character who has kind of the same level of pop culture penetration that Hellboy does.
I would argue that Walking Dead is close.
Yeah, I guess so. But that's a franchise, not a character.
Right, exactly.
Like I feel like the actual character of Hellboy.
Right.
Like the B.P.R.D stuff doesn't have the same level of penetration as Walking Dead does.
I think it's definitely a good point, and I think, I mean, look, the other side of that is, I mean, I agree with Toby. It's like sometimes it doesn't really matter what order they happen in until it starts to become an expansive universe, and that's the problem I have now with Hellboy. I still love it. I still read a lot of this stuff, but there are essentially 300 plus issues of Hellboy and B.P.R.D. and all this stuff combined, because B.P.R.D's on like issue 120 something.
Yeah, it's been going for a while now.
Like all the Hellboy miniseries combined, all the Lobster Johnson miniseries combined.
Is Wake the Devil still publishing? Hellboy in Hell?
Yes.
Yeah, Hellboy in Hell.
Close to wrapping up, I think.
Yeah.
So that's
and then there's Witchfinder, and then there's Abe Sapien. So there's got to be close, if not more than 300 issues total of all of this stuff put together.
Of Hellboy verse?
Yeah, and that's of the Mignola-verse. I mean, there's a lot of people call it. But, I mean, that's when it gets really challenging, is how do you penetrate that stuff? And I think they did a pretty decent job of collecting it. I kind of would like to see, like, new versions of the collections that are bigger, like bigger hardcover, like not the library editions, because those are meant to be more like absolutes, just about showcasing the art and stuff. But I wouldn't mind seeing like oversized trades with the issues coming out in like either the published order or the chronological order with like back matter notes and stuff.
I guess. I mean, coming
Even
at
a
it,
black and white phone book thing like the Judge Dredd case files.
That'd be kind of cool too.
coming at it kind of fresh, because I've only actually read a little bit of Hellboy, so I'm kind of like, okay, memory dump. I didn't know nothing about Hellboy. I'm going into this fresh.
Yeah.
Seeds of Destruction. I felt fine with it. Like, I didn't feel confused. The story seemed to kind of flow organically, and I went into this going like, okay, I'm a new reader. I'm coming into Hellboy. I read these stories. I enjoyed it. I want to move on to the next thing. Like, that's cool. I got into it.
Yeah.
I didn't feel confused on any level.
Yeah, no, that's why I was saying, like, you read the first, like, they read the first couple of trades, and it's like, or the first 3 or 4, and it's kind of like, okay, it's not really a big deal. But then in, I think, 5, which is Conqueror Worm, like, the story actually makes reference to certain things, and then you get to this point where you're like, should I know? Because he does that every story, right? Like, and then there was the time that we wrestled the giant barracuda from Asmogath. You're like, did I read that story?
Yeah.
Did I miss a story?
Does it exist?
Does it exist?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, is that the more issues there are, the more, as a reader, I think you start to be like, well, crap. Did I miss an issue somewhere?
And my argument is not for that for new readers, but like it's an annotated guide for hardcore fans.
Right.
That this has like, this would be something with like maps and all these notes and all these like, at the bottom of every
Ephemera?
panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the bottom of every panel there's just like links to editor's notes in the back matter.
I totally think it would be awesome to put out a like annotated Hellboy,
or
like
that's
the
what I'm talking
Hellboy
about.
companion
Yeah.
or whatever, where it's like, okay, here's how everything fits together.
And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not necessarily talking about replacing all
like
of
its
the old
own,
things.
it's as its own separate.
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. I would love to see an annotated guide of this because I would love to see more concept art and sketches and color tests and more interviews with Mike Mignola, because some of the trades have like a 1-page little recap by Mike Mignola being like, here's what I originally thought for this, and this was not in the book, and this wasn't there, and my editor saved my ass. And it's like, oh, that was cool. But I want more of that, like I want all the interviews and stuff about Hellboy to be collected somewhere.
I think that fits in a little bit with the conversation that we were having last week talking about Universe X. Like, there's a certain kind of mind that craves that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the much more casual reader who's like, oh, that's some stuff that happened. That was awesome. I had a lot of fun with that. I want to read the next thing. Like, don't care for all the backstory, how everything fits together, what the artist thought about doing it, like, what was your plan originally versus what is your plan now. Like, there are those people for whom that all of that stuff doesn't really enter into how they go about enjoying a comic book.
Well, it's similar to like people who just watch the movie versus people who watch all of the commentary tracks or all the special feature vignettes. Or whatever.
Like I know people who, and I mean this is not dating me so much as dating them, but when they would buy a new record, would go and read the liner notes.
Oh, yeah.
Before listening to the album.
Yeah. And I think it's also just the difference between like people who really enjoy Lord of the Rings versus people who have like memorized the appendices.
Yeah.
Like there's a wealth of information there. And as a reader, you have the choice of whether or not like you seek it out. And I think that Hellboy, he's created such a dense universe now in a good way, not in like, oh, it's too dense for new readers, because I think it's super new reader friendly. I think that it is dense enough now that it would be cool to have, how DC and Marvel put out those like
the handbook to the Marvel universe.
Not only the handbooks, but those like DC visual guides that those third-party companies put out.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm going to take your word for it.
It's a thing that exists, that they'll put out these like encyclopedias, but they're not the Ohatmu or whatever, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. They're like these other encyclopedias that third-party companies will publish. Like I think we could easily have a Hellboy one.
Yeah. Yeah, I will mention, because I have Joe's beautiful library edition, that there are some annotations, for lack of a better word, in the back, mostly around his art,
right?
Where he talks about the art that he made and all that stuff. Not so much about the story beats or the universe itself. Although he does make some offhand comments about stories he didn't tell or wanted to, or ended up not because of various issues.
Yeah.
But if I may, I'd kind of like to get into the story a little bit more as it is, because, like I said, I was kind of trying to reread this fresh, because I mean it's been a good long while since I've read any Hellboy, and I've never read that much to begin with. And I really enjoyed the hell out of this comic. And I said way the hell back whenever we read Fafford and the Grey Mouser, like I had tried to read Hellboy for a long time and never been able to do it because the art just, like I bounced off of it. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And going back and reading Fafford, his style, it was not as stylized as Hellboy is.
Yeah.
And so it was easier for me to read and appreciate that and then use that as a bridge to get into Hellboy.
Well, even Cosmic Odyssey, too, which was another Mignola book we read.
Absolutely. But reading it now and being able to get into it, there is so much to appreciate just about the art style. I was saying it as we were getting ready to record, but Mignola is really a master of the color black. Seed of Destruction, like, I don't know if he drew it on black paper or just went through and, like, inked in all of the gutter lines. But every single page, like, it's on top, it's all on top of black. There's no white. And it's not just, like, there's a ton of silhouette work, but it seems like the blackness is just kind of reaching out and enveloping everything. It's infused everywhere. And you're only getting these, like, intermittent splotches of color, and the color is so vibrant. Like, there's not a lot of gray tones. It's just like black, bright red right next to it.
Well, it's funny you should mention that too, because the book was never intended to be colored.
Really?
Yeah, when he drew it, he was like, I want this book to be black and white, and like true black and white, like Sin City black and white. Like,
that's interesting.
What you're seeing. And I think it was not until Dave Stewart started coloring the promotional posters and the covers that he was like, well, maybe we can try to do colors in this series. But if you look at all his original sketches and stuff, all that detail exists in the negative space, where it's like the white is there as the negative space and not the black. The black is the detail and the white is all meant to be empty, and then it flips when you color it. It looks different, in my opinion. It looks different when it's colored. Like, it looks significantly different.
Yeah, in the back of the first trade I'm looking at, there's a couple of just like sketch, not exactly sketchy.
Yeah, his really, really early stuff with those series.
Early concept art, pin art, where Hellboy looks very, very different. And so I can see what you're saying. But yeah, like, that's really interesting for me to hear, because I really love the color. Like,
yeah, me too.
It's absolutely gorgeous, and just, you know, his panel work is absolutely, you know, great. The way that things flow over each other, and you have these like really big panels that are just full of all of this like really intricate detail, and then you get these like huge splash pages that are 50% empty, and then there's just like a giant thing happening in one part of the page. Like, Mignola really, really is an amazing artist, and he's really advanced since some of the early stuff that we read, like Fafford and the Grey Mouser and Cosmic Odyssey. He is getting better all the time.
Yeah. He actually had a, I don't know if any of you guys ever listened to Chris Hardwick's The Nerdist podcast.
I have not.
But he did a sit down with Mignola not too long ago, and of course, a couple of things. I'm pretty sure I heard it on the podcast, but I have actually. It's funny that this book came up for us when it did, because I had been reading and or absorbing a lot of information about this series and kind of Mignola's process. And the two things that stuck out to me was that he was commenting that there's kind of this funny relationship, because he'll try to do things as the artist, and then he'll try to do things as the writer, and then he'll find himself basically yelling at himself, like, oh, that's a great idea, or no, you can't do that. Like, that's not what I want. And that sometimes it's hard to juggle those two things, but ultimately he feels like it's kind of a fun process. And then the other thing that I seem to remember, and I wish I had it in front of me, I'm very bad about that, was I think he basically said to the effect that because he's always drawing the things that he's thinking up, he's constantly trying things that he may never have actually been forced to do had he stayed working for somebody else. Like, you know, basically he's at a point where he's like, well, Hellboy's never done this before, so I'll draw that. We'll see how that goes, I guess.
Interesting.
Kind of a thing. Which I just thought was an interesting observation.
I'm flipping through the book, and I'm looking at some of the choices that he's making, and there's one panel that I've got right here where it's Rasputin. And the only part of him that you can actually see, you can see like half of his head, and then you can see the embroidery on his robes, that inverted pentacle with the dragon rising out of it and the crosses. And then there's like a background thing. And so you're sort of inferring his presence from all this negative space. Mm-hmm. And you're picking out a few of the crucial highlights, but you don't really see him.
Right.
And there's just panel after panel after panel that's like that, where there's all of this blackness everywhere. And these key details are being highlighted for you, and your eyes are being drawn to it. And I am just deeply, deeply impressed by the artistic choices that he makes and the way that he draws. Because I think that there's a lot of artists out there who could not draw something like this. And I think it's pretty incredible that we as consumers of art get the opportunity to absorb something like this, which is so outside of what the vast majority of mainstream comics are doing.
It's it's not completely a Mignola creation in so much as like this is a style, this pure black and white, and then when it's colored, it's almost, unless I'm mistaken, it's like 95% flat tones. Like, there aren't highlights on the colors. The colors are flat. Very rarely will there be, like, a highlight or, like, an airbrushed highlight subtle in the panel. It tends to be more flat colors and stuff. It's really kind of pop art in its style. But the way that he draws, the kind of the darkness, the Lovecraftian feel, the Conan... that like Hyborian feel of stuff, I think comes across in his stylistic choices, like how square jawed he makes things, how hunched Hellboy looks all the time, how like it's all in the character design for a lot of these characters, like how tall and dark and long Rasputin is, how he and his robes are indistinguishable from one another, like he is that dark cloaked presence, and he's able to use that to create atmosphere really well. I think it's something that Frank Miller would do really strongly on Sin City, was that he evoked an atmosphere with two colors. And it was a huge accomplishment in that book as well. I think people are a bit more drawn to Hellboy because there is so much more detail in the set dressing and stuff with Hellboy, I think. I find... some Sin City books have an amazing amount of detail put into the set dressing, and then some panels, there's none. It's like, it kind of exists in a weird negative space, but Mignola does that too.
Well, I feel like Mignola's art is cleaner than the Miller's, in a sense. Like, my sense of always looking at Miller's is that it's kind of scratchy, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like, I feel like there's kind of a freneticism to it that when I look at the Hellboy stuff, the lines are chunkier. The delineation between where shadows start and stop is chunkier.
I'm wondering if that's Frank Miller, or if that's Lynn Varley.
Yeah,
that was the inker, right, on The Dark Knight Returns. No, it was Klaus Janson. Sorry, Klaus Janson on Dark Knight Returns added a lot of that type of feel to that book. And when you look at Sin City, it's very like flat color. Like,
it's been a long time since I looked
really
at Sin
sharp.
City, but I do remember.
But when you look at his new stuff, like Holy Terror, like that's incredibly scratch influenced, and it's a lot closer to what Klaus Janson was doing with.
I remember some panels of The Hard Goodbye were definitely scratchy.
Yeah, I think there's a good mix of like tonal material in that he doesn't have a lot to play with other than his line weight,
right?
Because it's black and white. Right. He only has like detail and line weight to use as his, and like how much negative space is being taken up with either black or white in each panel. Like, he doesn't have a lot of variables to move around. So I think that there's definitely some variances in like how thick his line weight is and stuff. And I think you see that in Mignola's art too. In the Hellboy stuff, like sometimes Hellboy's face is really detailed, like it looks all scratched up and beat up, and sometimes it's a lot less so.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
and I think it's interesting to compare Hellboy to Atomic Robo, since the comparison is drawn between the two of them, because there are some story stylistic similarities between them. But when you look at the art, it's like 100% night and day. I mean, I think it would be hard to find more different styles.
Well, I mean, even in the flavor, there's
Yeah.
very distinct difference. And it's funny. It's almost like, I mean, they're almost like polar opposites of each other, like the same, like fascinating, tough lead, of investigative types gets into trouble. Hellboy being, gothic, pulpy,
Cthulhian,
folklore influence, and then Atomic Robo being bright, science, kind of more fun. I mean, there's
very
a
very
sense
kind
of humor.
Flash Gordon, rockets with fins and ray guns and giant monsters.
And Hellboy has a sense
Dinosaur.
of humor, but it's kind of a lot more.
It's very dark.
Well, it's as dark as the rest of the
Super
series.
dark.
So,
But I do love the Lovecraftian influence, no pun intended, on this book. Just and not so much like it's a scary monster, but like the weird, like unknowable horror from the depths of time and space, and reality is not what you think, and chaos and madness reign everywhere, and what you see on Earth is the faint illusion between you and true understanding of the universe.
well, and the thing that I think is fun about the Hellboy thing is that, I mean, Mignola clearly, he thanks Lovecraft, but there is this one kind of smirking aspect to the entire series, because it's like because even his fight with Rasputin in Seed of Destruction is like, you cannot contemplate the great horrors of the beyond, and Hellboy's like, yeah, but I can basically shoot it in the face and punch it real hard, and that'll probably get the job done.
That's like super Conan influence too, though, because Conan's in this world that is like very magic based, and there's Tathamon, and like all these crazy sorcerers and vampire ladies and like all this stuff and zombies, and Conan gets out really just by cutting things up and punching stuff.
I may be mistaking my order of things, and I know a couple of people off the top of my head that could very easily correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Conan itself was influenced by Lovecraft. Like I think that there was a cross connection between the two of those.
Yeah.
And I mean, even in Hellboy, he references Hyperborea.
Yeah.
Like, and the fall of Atlantis and all that stuff,
which
that
is
gets referenced in Conan a lot.
Conan is Hyboria, but it's referenced.
Well,
to
no,
that.
Hyperborea is a land within the realms that Conan visits. It's the Hyborian Age, but there is a land of Hyperborea.
Okay.
It's like this crazy, like far north Shangri-La thing inhabited by inhuman, godlike.
Oh, that's
things.
in the very first trade that Dark Horse did.
Yeah,
that's the Frost Giants one.
Yeah,
that Kurt Busiek wrote.
The land of Hyperborea beyond the north winds, or something like that.
Okay, I remember that now.
Super cool.
Yeah, I just thought that was a reference to Hyboria, because as much as I love Conan, I cannot keep the names straight. I just can't. But yeah, definitely Conan, Robert E. Howard was influenced by Lovecraft. In the Elder Gods in Conan are very similar, if not the same, as the Elder Gods in some of the Lovecraftian.
And they do some of the same things with like weird aliens from outer space, where like they're aliens, but they're also kind of demons, or maybe they're gods.
Well, that's the whole thing about the Elder Gods is like they exist in deep space, right? But is it the space that we see when we look up? Like, where does it exist?
God, I love that bit where Rasputin is going like, "I went to the blackness behind the stars."
I love that.
Oh, so cool.
I forgot also in the first one that there's that cutaway to like that space station that's
right.
Like,
yeah,
monitoring.
that's what I was getting to. The aliens who are monitoring the Ogdru Jihad.
Yeah.
Or Jihad.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, there's aliens. That's cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, are they aliens? Are they what the fuck even are they?
They're interdimensional old one.
Like, are
monitors,
they in deep space, or are they in another dimension? You don't fucking know.
Well, exactly. And the old gods are the same way. Like, where are they? Where is it? And it's something that we talked about a little bit on the Witch Doctor episode, which also used some similar concepts with old gods coming to Earth and leaving behind their stuff.
H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard actually exchanged letters.
Yeah.
There you
persistently.
Yeah, I was pretty sure they were friends.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
Lovecraft actually, I believe he had correspondences with a lot of authors.
Well,
that was kind of part of his whole thing.
Yeah, a lot of what we think of as like the Cthulhu mythos, the old gods stuff, I think it was 5 different writers were massively inputting into that. And they were all like contemporaries, and they were writing at the same time. I was reading about this not long ago because my exposure to Lovecraft is all pop culture references to Lovecraft's writing. So I was like, I should learn more about that. But yeah, I believe it was like 5 different writers were all coming up with a lot of the mythology that we now attribute solely to Lovecraft. So
well, I'm sure that my mother is listening to this, and by the time this has been out for an hour or two, she'll probably have posted a bunch of corrections on the Facebook page.
Please do. If your mom's listening, I would love to know more about Lovecraft stuff. So if she wants to,
as I've mentioned in the past before, my parents are science fiction authors. They've
Yes.
done a bunch of research in the history of science fiction, and so I'm sure that my mom has.
They will
If
know.
doesn't remember off the top of her head, has that information close at hand.
yeah, and I don't know any of that information, and I'd like to know, and our listeners should know. So,
Well,
thank
Lovecraft is a very interesting guy, not least of all because he was super racist.
you. Yeah,
Like,
well,
not just like old-timey people were
Old-timey.
racist because that's the environment that they grew up in. But no, like, people who knew him at the time were like, wow, that dude's super racist.
Well, he was writing in the early like
in the 20s.
20s, yeah, and so there was a big eugenics movement that existed.
Yeah, but no,
in
like,
America.
he was super racist. He was paranoid as
eugenics.
shit about like mulattoes.
Yeah, well,
like,
that's
half white, half black people.
That's eugenics. Eugenics
Yeah.
is basically the most racist thing that's ever existed in America, with the exception of slavery, which is just like, there are people of a certain race that are better than people of a certain other race, and if you mix those two bloods together, that's awful. And that's what eugenics said, and it was a terrible thing, and we were totally right on the side of... There were a lot of people in America that were very much a supporter of what Hitler was doing, and very much like, yep, that guy's got it all figured out, and like everything was that. And then
Jerry's got some pretty good ideas.
and then we got drawn into the war because we got attacked by one of his allies. Like, things could have ended up very differently. It's something that is an interesting part of American history. But if people at the time were going, hey, that guy's super racist, I'm betting that those people were supporters of the ideas of eugenics and like breeding out the messed up stuff in people's DNA. It's awful. Basically, it's a terrible thought. Yeah. And it's, as all racism, it comes from the idea of supremacy, that like, I must be better than everyone else. And that's bullshit. So,
well put.
Yeah, well, I think it's bullshit. But yeah, there were definitely people of his time that were very much a supporter, and
There's people of our time.
There are definitely, that's true. But they were definitely afraid of mixing the races. It like scared the shit out of them, and so that was Lovecraft.
So, Cade, is there anything that you'd like to add? Like, what were your thoughts on the book?
Okay, so aside from... Shit, I just forgot the title of the other Hellboy.
Seed of Destruction.
Oh, we
Wake the
read
Devil.
Masks of Monsters
Masks
before.
and Monsters.
Yeah.
Okay, so aside from that, I'd never read a Hellboy book.
Nice.
And like, I was supposed to read Masks and Monsters to get me into Hellboy. It kind of worked because I became interested in the character. It didn't work in that I started reading Hellboy. Or that I didn't start reading Hellboy.
Till now.
Until now. And, I mean, I really liked it. The art is very contrasting with itself, which is, I think, important sometimes.
How so?
Mainly, like, you can tell where one thing ends and another begins.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, except when you're not supposed to, like
Rasputin.
Rasputin.
In the shadows, where he's coming out from behind that woman. What's her name? At the mansion.
Oh, Emma? Is it Emma?
I love that panel so much, where she's just like talked to Abe Sapien and Liz and Hellboy, and then they all leave to go with the butler, and then he just kind of like appears out of the shadows.
Oh, yeah.
It's Emma.
Yeah, I love that panel.
But yeah, like the whole thing, like with the reds, like the reds of Hellboy versus the black backgrounds, or versus the blue back, like everything pops.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's really good, especially for new readers. Like, I think that's an important art style to put towards new readers.
Yeah.
I did have a couple issues with the timing thing, like Brant said, but even more so, occasionally he would do scene changes mid-page, which was awkward sometimes. Like, Hellboy would fall down or get knocked out, but it's still a half page, and then the next scene is starting on that page. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, what the fuck is going on? Because, you'd think it's the continuation of that scene, when in reality it's two other characters half the country away. Mm. The one I'm thinking of in particular was it cuts to one of the other investigation teams who see the explosion and whatnot.
Yeah, it's in the second book. It's when Abe Sapien and what's his name are looking at the castle that Hellboy just blew up.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, and the scene changes halfway through the page, and that was very, very jarring to me. But overall, I really liked it. The concept is really cool. I like the whole Lovecraftian Nazi magic horror stuff,
like mixing all those genres and like folktales, like and mythology, like mixing all of that in just like one big pot and just.
I'm actually flipping through Wake the Devil, and I love this scene where Hellboy has like fallen down into the bottom of the castle, and he's just walking and talking to himself, and there's just like this old vampire-y kind of dude, and he's like, "Hello," just like over a piece of.
He's like, just eating a guy.
Just eating a guy.
He's eating the guy that Hellboy's looking for.
And then he like takes 3 or 4 pages to very carefully and patiently explain everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So that he can lure Hellboy into being complacent for a moment. So he can suddenly stab him with a dagger. And then like that does nothing and Hellboy kills him.
I love it.
Like it's such a great scene. Just in the pacing of it and the way that it kind of organically tells you like, here's everything important that's going on and the monsters that you're about to see in a way that feel like it doesn't feel just inserted.
There is a large amount of just what in normal like film and video games and comics to me would feel just like a bunch of mystic babble, just like, what is any of this mean? Like, why are they telling me this? When you watch a lot of fantasy movies, I think that they're just saying stuff to sound like the world is more impressive. But something I get out of Hellboy when I read it is like, no, this matters. Like this all ties into the universe in a very specific way. Like he picked these things for a reason because they're going to come up later. And that may not be true, but I get that feeling from the way that he presents everything. It doesn't feel like he's just saying the names of places just to say them. Like there's stuff that you're going to see later. And so that whole scene is talking about how he because that's the father basically of the vampire.
And like restores her to life, and then his son dies, and then he gets her to like turn him into a vampire.
And that could all just sound like, oh, it's mystic backstory, but that is very relevant to the next few pages that you're going to see. Like the way he tells you that right before that stuff becomes relevant feels more organic, I think.
I think you're also always learning how the rules of the universe operate right before it's a thing that you need to know.
Right, where if he told it to you at the beginning of the story and then didn't talk about it for a while, you'd be likely to forget it or write it off as like mystic babble or bullshit.
Right.
I think.
There's a really cool moment where Hellboy's like, I've got my pockets full of charms.
Yeah.
And they did diddly squat in this case. That's not good.
I loved that. Anytime he fights Rasputin, I love it.
I like that the quote-unquote background things showing up later. Mm-hmm. I like that that's a thing. Or things that they drop hints to that are coming up, but they don't go into them yet. Like the end of book 1, where they show the place up north and the light turns on.
Oh, yeah. It's that team awakening.
Carl,
Frozen.
Cronin and the rest of them.
Yeah. What's crazy, and you guys may or may not know this if you're not reading Hellboy, but that first issue of the book has frogs in it.
Yes.
That storyline has now just been resolved after 125 issues of or 75 issues of B.P.R.D. That was the Plague of Frogs, is all tying back to that original appearance of the frogs and why Rasputin is using those like frogmen guys.
Interesting.
So it's like 80 issues worth of material to tie up frogs.
Wow.
So possible future long run candidate, B.P.R.D. Plague of Frogs, 75 issue run on that, because that's the first arc of B.P.R.D. is 75 issues long.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
Holy
it's
crap.
the first arc of Fables is also 75 issues. Like there are mini arcs with
So,
it. Okay,
when
not
that
quite, because I
ends,
guess it
does-
doesn't start till trade 4.
When that ends,
there's
do
that
they
whole
start
first
Hell on Earth?
storyline
Yeah.
where Bigby Wolf is trying to figure
Yeah.
out who murdered.
Once they introduce the
Somebody.
adversary, which I think is like the end of the 3rd trade and the beginning
Yeah.
of the 4th trade, that arc
Yeah,
is
that
like,
whole adversary arc goes on fucking.
it
forever.
ends in issue 75. I always forget that it doesn't start until like the 4th trade. But
You're giving me a sassy look, Brant.
I am.
Do you object to my objections to Fables?
I do.
you think it all ties in?
Oh no,
Oh.
he was he made his comment like adversary.
Yeah,
so,
I
Toby
feel
doesn't like
the-
Fables.
I like the beginning arc, and then I think he goes in a direction dealing more with the world of Fables, and I think he moves away from the original conceit of the story,
Which is-
that I found more interesting, which was Fables in
Yeah.
the real world,
Yeah.
and kind of dealing with things in a real
Well,
worldish way.
I mean, if you want
and
to,
then it turns into this whole
Yeah.
war with the adversary thing. But I mean, we can, if we talk
Yeah.
about Fables, we can talk about my objections to it in greater detail.
I think that if you want a story in which fables live in the real world and interact with the real world in real time, you can watch Once Upon a Time, and it's super not good.
No, even Once Upon a Time
So-
basically does what Fables does.
No, it does that too.
Question
It's true.
about B.P.R.D.
Yeah, go ahead.
When the Plague of Frogs ends, is that when the Hell on Earth
I
starts?
think after, and I have not read all of B.P.R.D., so this is just my bad memory, but I believe after 75 is when they go back and do 1942, or like the 1940s, when they do the time
Okay,
jump
46,
back.
47,
Yeah.
49.
I think that's when that happens.
Okay.
Could be wrong.
'Cause
I
I've
don't
just-
remember because I've not read all of B.P.R.D.
I've just noticed like the last 60 issues of B.P.R.D. have all been called B.P.R.D. Hell on Earth.
Yeah, there is a long arc, Hell on Earth. Well, okay, not to spoil too much. Sorry, spoilers about B.P.R.D. But basically, B.P.R.D. the whole story is like they're going about to stop the apocalypse from happening, and they don't succeed. So the rest of the Hellboy verse is dealing with the fallout of like what happens when you don't win. Kind of. So that's a lot of the part I have not read. I believe that's what the Hell on Earth is referenced to. Sorry, spoilers for B.P.R.D. But that's so after the Plague of Frogs happens, there is
Okay.
a tonal change in the series based on events from the first arc. So I have not read all of that, so you can correct me if I'm wrong.
So, but previously you said to read volumes 1, 2, and 9 if you want to start reading B.P.R.D.
Yes.
But B.P.R.D. started long before volume 9 came out.
Right, but volume 9 contains, and this again is me having been told information by other people and now repeating it to you. So take this with a grain of salt. But I believe that trade 9 is when, again, spoilers, Hellboy quits the B.P.R.D. And so B.P.R.D. starts with Hellboy not being in the B.P.R.D. So
9 basically serves as a prequel to 1 and 2.
right. Even though I think that 9 was published after 1 and 2 had already happened.
Yeah, no, the B.P.R.D. suffers a little bit from the same
Right.
Mignolaverse issue where things happen non-linearly.
Right. And lately they've been putting years on that to help like correct it.
Right.
And it's been collected, I think, in the proper reading order, maybe. I don't know.
I don't remember.
But yeah, Hellboy leaves the B.P.R.D. and goes to have his own adventures. And I think that happens in 9.
Okay.
So you need to read 1 and 2 because you need the Rasputin, the Plague of Frogs, and some of the characters like Roger the Homunculus were introduced in this issue, even though they don't name him yet.
Yeah, I was
Spoilers.
just about to say, who?
The homunculus that they find.
Yeah,
his
good to
name
know.
is Roger. Doesn't really matter, but
Okay.
he becomes a character. more in the
Think about
future.
Johann, but he gets introduced in Hellboy, right?
I thought it was B.P.R.D. I don't know.
I don't remember when they found him.
Another B.P.R.D. member who was in Hellboy 2, the movie.
Yes.
It's been too long since I've seen that.
I don't like that
Me
one.
too.
I like it.
I
Everybody
enjoyed it.
likes the second one. I'm not as fond of it.
I have a big thing for Luke Goss.
I love the first one, which is the one that people like less.
I seem
normally.
to remember the first one was okay and the second one was better.
That's what most people say. I'm fine with that. I really like the first one because it feels less like a fantasy story. It feels more gothic in keeping with the books.
Yeah.
Even though they introduce characters that don't exist in the books and weird subplots that are like, this is clearly just for movies. It has a lot of issues.
Like the romance.
Like the romance plot and the subplot with the new B.P.R.D. agent and like Hellboy's going to take him under his wing. Like it's to help audiences be able to palette that world, I think, a little bit better.
Yeah.
Is that the right use of that word?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No, I think it's
Is it?
appropriate
Okay.
use.
And I think that's like my major problems with the first film is that it introduces these elements that I feel like are superfluous, but the story arc, because it follows like Conqueror Worm and this story, the Seeds of Destruction story, a lot
Doesn't it
closer.
also have elements of the right hand of doom?
Yes. It has. Well, it's like kind of it's the whole Rasputin plot takes place over many books in the
Right.
Hellboy, and they kind of took the best elements from that.
Yeah, and they changed
Or some
Cronin a little
elements.
bit.
Yeah.
Well, quite a bit, I guess.
Yeah,
Things like that. I mean,
yeah. There's some changes that I'm not overly fond of, but for the most part, like I love the way that they portrayed Broom, Dr. Broomholden or whatever his name is.
Home.
Hellboy's dad, father figure. And how I forgot how quickly he's just
Yeah,
gone in the book, and I was like, wow, whoops. There's a lot of my reading of Hellboy that was influenced by the film, because I saw the film first. So I often think that some of those elements are in the book, and they're not.
Well,
Like-
it's weird because the film Hellboy feels a little bit like Captain America.
Yeah.
Like, especially the Captain America movie that we just got,
Yeah.
which came out much, much later, obviously.
I'm not quite seeing the parallels there, but
Just the way
Man out
that
of time.
Dr. Broom, whatever the fuck his name is, was portrayed relative to Dr. Erskine in the Captain America movie. Like, it feels like there's some parallels.
And
But
the
again,
whole-
it's been a while since I saw that Hellboy movie, so maybe I'm just projecting.
I like the whole element of like it doesn't matter what you look like or where you came from, you can still do good things in the world, and that Dr. Broomhole kind of like our professor, he kind of like teaches Hellboy that, and that doesn't exist at all in the comic at this point. Of the two issues that we read, I also Abe Sapien and Hellboy's relationship in the movie is a lot more fleshed out, and warm. Then in this, it just they work together. And do they hang out and like drink beers and do whatever outside of like who knows? Hellboy doesn't have cats in this, which softens that character a lot, but I'm sure again was like added because of films and they're like, here's this big scary guy, we gotta make him relatable.
yeah. See, I don't know about that. Some of that stuff. Listening to Mignola talk about, like, apparently he and Guillermo del Toro just have a really good relationship, and Guillermo del Toro was like, well, I think this would be fun, and Mignola's like, sure, this version of Hellboy could do these things. Why not?
Guillermo didn't work on the first film. Which
I thought he did. I thought I heard that he had as the.
Oh, maybe I just don't know. I know he didn't direct the first one.
Yeah, but I thought he was attached to both of
Oh,
them.
I did not know that.
I have no idea.
I know he
I was
directed the
pretty
second
sure
one,
he
and the
was on
second one
both.
feels like Pan's Labyrinth starring Hellboy, but is in no way as interesting as Pan's Labyrinth to me.
I have not seen Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh my god.
So good.
I
Oof.
had a copy.
Yeah, he
I was
directed
going to
the first
watch
one.
it.
Did he?
And
Oh,
somebody's
my bad.
like, I didn't think that you liked gruesome stuff. And I was like, is there a lot of gore in this movie? And they're like, oh, yeah. And I was like,
Really? I mean, there's gross stuff in it, but I don't
Yeah.
feel like it's super. I mean, like it's a war. People
Well, I
are
have-
dying, and also
wait,
there
there's a
are
war in this movie?
in Pan's Labyrinth.
I didn't see it. I didn't watch it.
They're like refugees. They're like war refugees.
Oh.
Yeah.
Um,
Plus, but
Maybe
the
one day.
body work by Doug Jones, so good in that movie. It's just amazing.
he plays like at least 4 characters in that because he plays Pan and he plays the eyeball hands guy and he plays. He has a name. I don't remember what it is.
Does. I
It's
can't remember
eyeball
it either.
hands.
he's like the faceless one
It's
or something
Hans
like.
Ibelson.
He has a name, but no, Doug Jones.
No, it's Hans. It's Hans Eimelson.
I think he's called like the faceless one, or something like that. Something mythical, not Hans or
Well, yeah,
Doug.
I was gonna say it's an Italian or Spanish film.
Yeah,
Spanish, Italian.
It's all in Spanish.
Spanish. So no German names
Yeah.
show up in that one.
Yeah. But he plays Pan, and he couldn't hear in the helm, in like the head thing, the headset he had to wear
Right.
for Pan, so he would just do his lines in the hope that like he could remember the timing of other people delivering their lines, and remarkably did an amazing job at just like, their lines will take this long because I'm thinking about them saying it, and now I deliver this line, and it's just like, how do you do that? He's a phenomenal actor. Well, because he was also Abe Sapien. He was the body of Abe Sapien in the first movie, but he's the body and voice of Abe Sapien in the second movie.
I thought that David Hyde Pierce was the voice of Abe Sapien in both movies, but that he specifically requested to be taken out of the credits in the second one. So
No,
the
that's
guy who
the
does
first
the body got all the credit.
He took his name out of the first one, and he does not do the voice in the second one. And Doug Jones does the voice for Abe Sapien in all of the animated stuff.
Okay.
In all of the Hellboy animated. Which, those are kind of fun.
Cool beans.
I don't think they're nearly as good.
The 2 episodes.
What was it? The Sword of something, and there's...
I don't remember. I just saw that Ron Perlman was in 2 episodes.
They're movies. They're like
okay.
feature-length animated
Yeah.
films.
Is there anything else that we wanted to say about the Hellboy comic?
I do. I wanted to... I'm trying to think of how to phrase this a little bit, because I know the series that I'm going to reference is a series that draws a lot of negativity on this show.
Phrase it as a high boon.
No, I will not. So, a series that I really enjoy and that draws a lot of negativity on the show is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, in which you're combining a ton of elements from multiple different mediums and ideas.
And by draws a ton of negativity, you mean from Joe.
Well, I thought you weren't a fan of it either.
I like the first 2.
Okay,
I thought
that's
the
all
third
I like
one
too.
was not, and the Black Dossier were not good.
The Black Dossier is the one with James Bond in it in the 60s, and then there's
Right.
Century, which I
Which
didn't
is
enjoy as much either.
Terrible,
and
but the first 2 are good.
I love the first 2. That's when I talk about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I'm almost exclusively
You're talking
referring
about the
to
blockbuster action
first
film
2.
starring Sean Connery.
I actually, if you watch the first half of that movie where it's just him assembling the team and then you turn it off, it's not bad.
No, I know.
In any case, I feel like you and I are on the same page here.
Yeah, I like the first one. I like the first 2. I like the kind of it's an aggregate of a ton of different ideas, and just like these were characters that were created of an era, and this is kind of a what if all of the big pop culture like phenomenons of that era had to get together to fight against pop culture foes.
It's taking the idea of a shared continuity from superhero comics and retroactively applying it to the fiction of the previous century.
Yeah.
And kind of the early pulp stuff.
Yeah, so the first book has, the Invisible Man and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Alan Quartermain and Mina Harker from Dracula, and just a bunch of these characters all interacting together. And the second book
And
has
tons and tons and tons of references to other things.
Oh, the annotated guides that you can find online for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen are unfucking real. Like, there's stuff I would have never caught in a million years of reading literature and comics. Like, I never would have picked up on it.
Very offhand like just a random, like an object in the background
Yes.
with the name of what that object
Yes.
is. Sometimes maybe even not even the name. Just
Yeah.
there's a thing. What is that thing? I have no idea.
Yeah, in the
Or
script.
oblique references to like the moon pool.
Yeah. And in the script, Alan Moore has like laid out what's going to be in these panels because they're all references that he wants to make. But a lot of the itches that book scratches for me in terms of it is a melting pot of many ideas from many different writers. I think Hellboy scratches probably more for me, like in a better way. I really, really enjoy the mashup of magic and mythology and the Lovecraftian mythos mixed with like Russian folklore mixed with Judeo-Christian tradition of like the Spear of Destiny and all of what will come later, and actual historical figures like Rasputin, combined with the mythos that would grow out of his assassination and his role as the advisor to the czars. I love that he's able to combine all those things. And what I always think of is like, oh, this is a creator-owned thing. Like, he just created all this stuff is not true. Like, a lot of this existed beforehand, and he kind of masterfully weaves it together as a tapestry with stuff that he does create. He changes a lot of it to make it fit.
He's the J.K. Rowling of
well,
he doesn't. He's not
writers.
Deliberately copying characters and calling them her own.
Wow! Apparently.
Boom! Tim Hunter, suck a dick.
I agree with Mannix insofar as I love Doctor Strange. Like, I think he's cool. But I think that too often in fiction generally and comic books specifically, magic gets reduced to boom, boom, zap, zap, magic laser beams.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And this does exactly the opposite of it. And really strongly embraces kind of traditional folk understanding of magic and like old, Gnostic mysticism and period understandings from the Age of Enlightenment of what magic was and how it operated, going up through kind of the Theosophic period in the teens and the 20s of like other planes of reality and psychic powers and
I mean, everyone was
energies.
on fucking hella drugs back then too.
Oh,
so
drugs.
They were definitely experimenting with other. Well, it was the 1920s was after the Great Purge, but
well, it was
a lot of that stuff.
I want to say it was the Golden Dawn and Madame Blavatsky and
Aleister Crowley.
Yes, that's whose name I was about to try and remember and not be able to do. I did want to mention, though, my favorite Rasputin fact.
Mm-hmm.
So he was invited downstairs to like a fake party.
Yeah.
When the guys who tried to kill him.
That's what they poisoned him when he ate the cake, right? Yeah.
While all that was going on, like they were shooting him and stabbing him and poisoning him and doing all of these terrible things, the Tsar's family was upstairs listening to literally the one record that they had because Victrolas had just been invented over and over and over again to drown out the noise. And that record was Yankee Doodle Dandy.
That's weird.
Yeah.
That's super
weird.
That is super weird. Also, that's the one where like Yankee Doodle put a feather in his cap to call him back, right? Okay. So it's just a quick aside about that song, if you didn't know. The British wrote that song as to make fun of the Americans because it was like, oh, they're so dumb. They'd put a fucking feather in their hat and call it high fashion because macaroni was this designer in the UK. But Americans either were too dense to get that they were being made fun of or didn't give a shit and were like, nope, that's our fucking song now. I am a Yankee dude, which is like so unabashedly American even at that time. It's just like, what is this country?
We'll put the biggest feathers in our caps. That's right.
I don't get it. It's like, wow, this country, man, it can do whatever it wants, apparently.
Basically.
But that is one of my favorite facts is you take a song that's making fun of you and be like, no, that represents us. That's our song. We wrote that. Okay. Whatever you say, guys. But no, that's crazy. And the Rasputin, I watched like a History Channel documentary of the assassination of Rasputin, which was one of those ones with like terrible reenactments and dramatizations of it, but
History Channel.
It was the History Channel, absolutely. Back when the History Channel used to do that instead of show like
UFOs,
duck hunters, or whatever they show now.
UFOs.
UFOs all the time.
It was right after their World War II blue period.
Yeah,
into the shitty reenactment period.
And I loved the History Channel when I was a kid, so I remember watching that and being just like, "What the fuck?" He like ate all this poisoned cake and then was fine, and then they shot him in the back, and he walked out of the party, and then he got stabbed in the street, and he was still alive, and he didn't die until he fell into a river and froze to death. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's super nuts.
That's really weird. But a lot of mysticism had grown up around him as an advisor to the Tsars because he was attempting to stop hemophilia, where you just bleed all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That the son of the Tsar Nicholas had. Was it Tsar Nicholas or
it was Tsar Nicholas II.
Yeah. And so a lot of people thought he was magic or some kind of mystic.
Well, he was a monk.
Yeah. Well, not all monks are magic.
Well, the good ones are.
I'm sure
I
they
mean,
are.
once you reach level 12,
Yeah,
you get magic
sure.
fist.
Great. Cool.
Okay.
I hate this show so much sometimes. But that's what I love about this book so much, is that it's combining fresh, brand new characters with mysticism and magic, and it's something I love about John Constantine. That scratches a lot of those itches for me too. So, just with Delano in the Constantine run, where he would use like ley lines, and paganism was like a huge influence on the early John Constantine stuff. I like that mixing of historical facts mixed with historical mysticism, mixed with mythology and religion and brand new characters. And I think it works really well in this series. I think it's outstanding. And I think if you like Lovecraftian type stuff, but have never really gotten into a book series about this, like, I think this works really well and you could read this. I think that if you like superhero stuff and you're kind of looking for like this weird gateway into indie comics, like, this might work for you, because there are superhero esque characters in this. Like, Torch of Liberty is kind of this like Captain America superhero type guy. He gives Hellboy his gun. Lobster Johnson, if you're reading the ongoing Lobster, or the miniseries, Get the Lobster is the miniseries that's going on right now as we're recording this. I think that series is fantastic, and you don't have to have read any of the Mignolaverse to enjoy stuff like that. So if you want to jump in through Lobster Johnson, who's not in these trades but will appear in later Hellboy trades, he's this like pulp crime fighter hero, kind of like the Shadow or the Avenger in the 1920s and 30s, who like fights Prohibition era booze smugglers and stuff in the 20s, and now is like fighting mobsters that are increasingly more magic influenced. I think if you liked Fatal, the series that Brubaker was doing that was very Lovecraftian influenced, I think you'd dig this series. I think there's a lot of people that would like Hellboy and haven't tried it yet, and I think they should. I think it's something we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to get into, like I said, but once you can kind of get over how stylized it is and get into it, it is incredibly rewarding.
See, I always, as soon as I saw the art, I was like, I'm in.
Yeah, me too.
So I never found it hard to get into.
But there's something to be said about people who can appreciate a wide variety of art. Some people don't have that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely have artists that I'm just like, no, thanks.
Right, and there's some people that they like a specific style, they like it to look a certain way, and when books fall outside of that, it's definitely outside their comfort zone. So there are people that I think will be off-put by this, just like there are, there's always going to be people off-put by some artist.
Greg Land.
Well, that's for good reason.
There's a difference between being a good artist and fucking copying the same shit over and over and over again, and tracing porn for every single female character.
Well, and also, Greg Land, I think, is just a shit artist. But there's something to be said about, like, some people aren't going to be able to get into Brandon Graham or
Humberto
Ramos or Scotty Young or guys that are more on the stylized edge of comics, I would say.
Who's the guy who's doing Ghost Rider right now?
Oh, it's Trad Moore.
Yeah.
Who did Luther Strode.
He is an incredible artist.
Yeah.
But I have a very hard time reading.
Yeah, I could see how that would be like stylistically off-putting to a lot of people, but I think it's absolutely like just the coolest shit I've ever seen.
Like, I look at that and I'm like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But actually reading the issues, I'm like,
It is a breath of fresh air in comics, in my opinion. But
yeah, absolutely.
God, in the later issues, the mob boss that you meet at the beginning has like mutated on these drugs, and he has like fucking 6 arms, like Goro, and just looks absolutely. He's made of muscles. He's 800% muscles,
and he has 300 teeth.
Yeah, he's insane. It's cool.
It's crazy.
It is as over the top as you can get with comic book art in a lot of ways. But I mean, I could see how this series would be off-putting in that it is extremely stylized. But I really like it. I think if you're looking for ways into Hellboy, it's a lot like Conan, where you just kind of have to jump in. Like, it's some people will tell you good starting points, and none is more valid really than any of the others.
Right.
You just kind of have to get your feet wet, read some stuff, realize that you're going to read stuff out of order, make mistakes, not understand certain parts, and go, I don't know what I just read, and just power through it until you're comfortable enough with the universe to go back and try reading it from a different part or from the beginning. I think if you want to get into Hellboy, there's Cade recommends Hellboy Mask and Monsters if you're coming from the superhero end. I still think...
that was actually a recommendation from a friend. I'd never read it before.
Oh, that's right, yeah. And this one, I still think starting with Hellboy Trade 1 is probably the easiest way to do it. But you can also jump in at Witchfinder, because that's kind of a standalone, but it's set in the same universe as Hellboy. So artifacts that they're finding in Witchfinder will show up later in Hellboy. So you can like read that before, and then when you're reading Hellboy, you'll be like, "Oh, that's cool." So there's lots of different ways to get into the series. This is probably where I would start. This is where I did start. So
Me too.
Well, I've said it a few times. I had a hard time. Fafford and the Grey Mouser was the key for me. Like it operates along similar lines in a lot of ways, and the art is not as stylized.
That's true.
That was the key that I needed to go
See, I
to make that jump up to Hellboy.
And I started with Hellboy, and I couldn't read Farfod and the Grey Mouser because the art wasn't stylized enough.
yeah.
I was like, this
yours
doesn't
is
look
weird.
right.
I love reading old Mignola stuff, though. I really like it. Like the Cosmic Odyssey, I love.
I did not realize until very, very recently that a free issue, like one-shot X-Men story that I got at a science fiction convention in like 1992 was drawn by him, where it's Wolverine in the Savage Land.
Yep.
And he fights a robot dinosaur.
Mm-hmm. It's like a T-Rex, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's sweet.
And there's an apocalypse shows up and is like all smiley and happy.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's super weird.
That's creepy.
Before they'd really nailed down his character.
I'd be happy too if I was watching Wolverine fight a robotic dinosaur.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, assuming they weren't either one of them trying to eat me.
Well, it was his robotic dinosaur.
Then apparently the dinosaur was doing exactly what he wanted. Ergo, he would be happy.
Yeah.
And then there's Batman stuff that was drawn by Mignola.
Yes.
Gotham by Gaslight. Sorry,
Yes.
that just like completely slipped my mind.
Did he also do the Doom that came to Gotham?
I think he wrote that, but didn't draw it. I can't remember if he drew that one or not. I know Matt let me borrow it, and I read it, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Fair enough. Do we want to move on to recommendations?
Yeah, let's
then?
do it. Who wants to go first?
I guess I will go first.
Okay.
And I'm bringing back a book that I think I pitched twice before, but maybe I only pitched it once. So I am pitching Street Angel by Jim Rugg and Brian Maruca.
Cool.
And Street Angel is about a homeless teenage ninja girl named Jessie Sanchez, who is the Street Angel. And reading off the back of the book, in the worst ghetto on earth, a young homeless orphan rules the streets with her fearsome kung fu and deadly skateboarding. Jessie Street Angel Sanchez fights ninja gangs, evil geologists, nepotism, ancient gods, homework, and hunger while perpetually seeking the holy grail of cardboard boxes. And it's just kind of a weird, fun, tongue-in-cheek, homeless superhero-ish story about this girl. There's a lot of really great action. The art is great. There's some crazy science fiction-y fantasy stuff that goes on where an ancient god decides to just transplant conquistadors into the modern world and they're running over the city. Or Satan shows up. Or Dr. Pangea wants to reform the ancient supercontinent of Pangea and make himself king of the world. And it's crazy. It's a lot of fun. There were only 5 issues printed, so you can get the entire series in one trade paperback.
It's all ages, correct?
Yeah.
Ish? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's all ages.
It's like young adult for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing that would be inappropriate for a 10-year-old.
And it's black and white.
And it's black and white.
And it's very cool.
And it's super cool. And Aphrodisiac shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Which means nothing to anyone,
Nope.
but if you read the book, it's funny. So that's my pitch.
All right.
Street Angel.
Sweet.
And
Kate,
it's pink.
It is pink. It is a pink cover.
It's like
It's Oni
pig
Press.
pink.
Oni Press,
no,
no?
Slave Labor Graphics.
Oh, okay. That's
I
also
for some reason
local,
thought
too,
we
right?
talked about this
Portland.
book.
Yeah.
What's that?
I for some reason thought we talked about this book already, but
No,
maybe it was just that I borrowed it
borrowed
from
it,
you
yeah.
and then
Yes.
we talked about it at Joe's house.
I think that's probably the case. Because I believe that I have pitched it twice, and this is number 3.
Cade, what would you like to recommend this week?
So I went back to Brian from Facebook's list. And
Which, thank you, Brian, for saying that we're not allowed to read the list.
That's a secret list between Brian and Cade.
That's fine. I just didn't know that was a thing, so thank you for clearing that up.
So I went back to it. I'm going to start knocking them down.
Sweet.
So this week, I kind of didn't want a superhero book, but I ended up choosing a superhero-esque book.
Cool.
And this is Sex by Joe Casey, and the artist just escaped me.
I'm sure if you search for Joe Casey sex, you'll come up with just this and nothing inappropriate.
I would
Chip
not.
Zdarsky does the art on Sex Criminals, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That name came to mind, and I
can't
"That's not
remember,
right."
but this is a book about a superhero who had quit, comes back to the city, and doesn't know what to do with himself. And so it's Brian had explained it to me as, what if Batman retired? What would he do? And
Open an ice cream shop.
I
in the
doubt
fan
it.
fiction that I totally am about to write.
I doubt it.
this sounds
Called
awesome.
the Bat Freeze. No, we'll come up with a better one. Bat cones? No.
Well, no, he's competing with Mr. Freeze, who has an ice cream shop across the street.
Didn't Mr. Freeze used to say Batsicle? Maybe he could call it that.
Yes.
Piotr Kowalski.
Oh, Peter Kowalski, that's right. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Internet.
So he comes back after making a promise that he's not going to be a superhero anymore, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. And we also get a look at what have his supervillains been doing? What has his ward been doing?
Cool.
Like, it kind of really screwed things up that he quit, but in some ways it's better and it's different, and he's going through this inner turmoil, and it's a very extremely graphic book, as you would think it would be, as you think it would be, since it's called Sex. There are almost pornographic scenes. So it's interesting. It can be hard to get through. If you had a hard time getting through a book like Empowered, then this would be even
Because
more
of the
so.
sexual content.
Yes.
I see.
But like, I don't know. I think it would be an interesting book to talk about.
For sure.
Cool.
Very cool. Brent, what have you brought out of the archives this week?
I brought it's 2 volumes, but it was originally published as issues 66 to 76 of what had started as the Grant Morrison run on JLA in the late 90s, which is Joe Kelly's Obsidian Age, which is a personal favorite of mine. It rests in my heart. And I kind of felt inspired to bring it because it has the JLA, the big 8 of the JLA, who were the big 7 plus Plastic Man, which was a legacy from Morrison's run, gets sucked back in time after fighting a bunch of unknown foes who turn out to be basically the Justice League of Atlantis. And it turns out that Aquaman, who had died previously in the series, is actually being held prisoner in past Atlantis. So JLA goes back in time to deal with that, but meanwhile, all hell is breaking loose on the modern front. So a bunch of B-listers and sidekicks basically form a Justice League in the present, including Tempest, who was Aquablad, Major Disaster, who was actually a JLA villain, and a bunch of other folks are basically... So it jumps back and forth between the 2 time periods. There's lots of really interesting characters. It leads to kind of a big sea change for the Justice League in that era. A bunch of the characters, like... It's the end of this series where Kyle Rayner leaves Earth. John Stewart rejoins the JLA. A couple of characters from the Atlantean period end up in the present after the series is on, and they end up being part of the JLA for a while. This leads in relatively short order to a series called Justice League Elite, JLE. And I don't know, it's got kind of a weird, like, it has a lot of magic and supernatural elements and a lot of superheroics, and I like drawn by Doug Mankey, who's actually one of my personal favorites. It's got kind of an interesting flavor to it. I like Joe Kelly, who's kind of like Mr. Fill-In, it seems to me, for a lot of the big two. Like he shows up in like weird little pockets, although he did do he was one of the first Deadpool runs, I think.
On the yeah, I think he did one of the first solo Deadpool.
Yeah, the first solo.
Well,
ones,
there were two Deadpool miniseries that were 4 issues each, I believe. And then Joe Kelly did the first ongoing Deadpool series for some pretty long period of time.
Yeah. Mark Waid actually did one of those miniseries.
Right. Pretty sure. But anyway, it's just it's a really it kind of feels to me like the Justice League Universe cartoon. Like there's a ton of characters, you get to see them interact. This book's in the middle of the series, so you see lots of interesting interactions. You see people kind of act outside of character but for legitimate reasons, and there's I don't know, it's just tasty, I guess is the only way I can think of it, but I really like it, and I think people should read it because it's kind of a great really big story for the JLA that's not, aliens invade, Justice League fights. It's got a little bit more flavor to it.
Cool.
Excellent.
Worthy to note, Joe Kelly is personal podcast favorite, I think, for I Kill Giants.
Yes, I was going to say, that's right.
And Space Ghost.
And yes.
Also, clearly that's what Chard was going to bring up.
Space I was going to say Four Eyes, which is my favorite.
Yes,
but yeah. No, Space Ghost. What numbers were these trades, just out of curiosity?
Numbers 11 and 12.
Okay, cool. So they're after Tower of Babel, which is one that we've read before on the show.
That's volume 7.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
They've all been recollected now as different numbers, just to be extra confusing.
Yeah, which is why I mentioned that they were specifically issues.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if you search for the Obsidian Age, you'll find them.
And even the trades have that as a subtitle.
They're collected as bigger trades for a better value now, so it is better, but now I think it's the Tower of Babel ends up in like book 5 because there's more books in each issue.
Right.
Or
probably
each
puts
trade.
Obsidian Age at either book 7 or 8.
Yeah. But yeah, very cool.
Good deal.
Awesome.
Chard,
I was waffling today, so I have two written down, and I'm still kind of waffling, just like last week.
I had 3 literally up until the moment that I pitched one.
But this is my 4th image recommendation, so only 48 weeks more to go of image recommendations. Hooray! It's getting.
Are you tired of it yet?
No. Well, kind of. I'm getting tired of it only in the fact that I keep reading non-image books and going, oh, I'm totally bringing that. Damn it. I cannot bring that. So I will have a good list of stuff backed up, though, by the time I'm done with this, that I won't have to think so hard about what to bring every week, which is kind of why I did this.
Well, maybe I'll steal that list from you and poach all the good books off of
That's fine. Sex is Image. Is that?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. So
It
that
is.
was on my
Yes,
list.
it is.
But this week, I think I'm going to go with a trade that was released last week, which was Rocket Girl Volume 1.
God damn it, that's on my list.
I'm sorry, bro. It's an image book, and it just came out, so I got to jump on it. This is the first 5 issues of a series called Rocket Girl. It's Brandon Montclair with art by Amy Reeder, who is phenomenal, and the art alone is enough for me to want to read this series. But basically, the story is this young, I think she's 16.
Yes.
This 16-year-old protagonist named Daeyoung Johansson is from the far-flung, high-tech super future of 2014, and she travels back in time to 1986.
And she is part of the teen police.
Yes, she is a teen police officer.
A detective.
A detective in the teen police who she's investigating a case which involves Quantum Mechanics, which is this huge mega corporation in the future.
That owns everything.
That owns everything. And so she goes back to 1986 when that company is like first forming, sort of, to go investigate that case. And hijinks ensue because she's kind of this woman out of time and also has all this high-tech technology.
Like a rocket pack.
Like a rocket pack, which is where she gets her name, Rocket Girl, from. And the character design on this book is phenomenal. I love the art. The action sequences are amazing. There's some chase sequences, jetpack chase sequences in this book that are just like mind-bendingly unreal. I just love the way that, like, how fluid the art looks and how great the colors are in this series.
You also get flashback forwards.
Yeah.
To the year 2000.
Yes.
I think it's actually 2013.
It may
that
be
she's
13.
from, with other members of the teen police, like continuing her investigation.
And her boss, who's like 18.
And it's funny because the past is the future, and the present is the past.
Yeah.
It's super weird and fun.
Yeah. On the Image website, it said 2014, so that's what I wrote down. But I think it started being published in 2013, so that may be the year.
I think so.
But yeah, it flashes back. It flashes back in sequence of her life, which is the future because she's a time traveler. Of her like arguing with her sergeant, who's this like very slightly older also kid, and like his interactions with this mega corporation.
The police commissioner Gomez, who's like
maybe
like 17, 18 years old.
And it's funny, it's cool. There's some really touching moments in there. There's great character stuff. I love the design and the colors and the art and the writing. The dialogue is super funny because there's all this 1980s pop culture and these weird, 1980s clothing that everyone's wearing. And it's set in New York. And so the first volume is called Times Squared. And that is what my recommendation is this week.
Nice.
So look forward to 48 more Image recommendations in the upcoming weeks.
Cool beans.
Toby, what would you like to read?
Well, Rocket Girl was on my list to pitch, so I'm going to fucking vote for that. Right. Why not?
Okay. Toby just went. Okay, what would you like to read?
Street Angel.
Sweet. Brant.
Rocket Girl.
Ooh, nice. I was going to vote for Street Angel, but now I can't because I was going to tie it. Sorry. So I'm going to go with Justice League, Obsidian Age.
All right.
Out of just for the record. But yeah, that's
Let the record show.
Let the record show I voted for Justice League. I love that series. There's so many good arcs in that JLA run, and this one is a really, really cool one. So check it out, everybody.
Awesome.
And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you guys next week. Any announcements on the outro? Nope.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Nope. All right. We will.
Joe's wrong.
Joe's wrong. And
about everything,
All right.
especially related to Hellboy.
Yes.
Ignore everything that he said on this episode.
Yeah. I'm probably just going to mute his mic for this whole episode.
I would honestly just go back and edit him out.
I think I'm going to. All right. Well, we'll catch you guys next time. And bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Me From the Gutters. I hope our recommendations have inspired you to go out and find some new comics you'll enjoy. Join us next time for a discussion of our selected title, but like every week, we encourage you to read all of the recommended books. In the meantime, please leave us an iTunes review. It really does help new listeners find the show. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. Feel free to email us at contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Please send us any questions, comments, or recommendations you might have. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.